11D.
Huh. When I made How to Make an Awful Conlang 5, I just said that as a joke. But how would writing in higher dimensions actually work? In this video I want to explore that, combining theoretical physics, mathematics, and linguistics. First, I should clarify what a dimension means. In either physics or mathematics, a dimension is the minimum number of coordinates needed to specify a point in that space. Naturally, we typically write in 2 dimensions. Our letters in both digital and print forms have both width and height. It is within those parameters that we partially determine the values of letters. Going forward in this video, I'm going to be referring to letters by their technical terms, glyphs and graphemes. Graphemes are non-concrete, but they are the smallest functional units of a writing system. The term glyph is more expansive. They refer to any meaningful mark or the specific design of any character. So these 2 characters are glyphs of the same grapheme A. Anyways, now that I have some terminology down, I want to talk about Canada. Toronto is somewhat famous for its big Toronto sign, which is composed of big 3D blocks. So let me ask you this. Is this 3D writing? These are clearly versions of glyphs that have depth in addition to height and width. Obviously, you're just seeing a 2D representation of them on your screen, so right now it's technically not 3D. But also note that these are freely suspended glyphs. Writing is typically made on a medium of some sorts. Paper, rock, clay, word processors, etc. I would typically argue that although the Toronto sign is readable glyphs, it's not writing. However, we're going to need to push that definition a bit for this video out of necessity, so please forgive me. Let's start with writing in the dimensions available to us in our human existence. We are able to perceive things in 2D and 3D space, and we can also see 2D representations of the 0 and first dimensions. So this is 2D representation of the alphabet in 0-dimensional space. Not exactly great for writing, since the 0 dimension is literally just a point that makes up an entire geometrical plane, and as such, each grapheme exists in its own 0-dimensional space. The first dimension also sucks for writing. This is what the alphabet looks like in the first dimension. As with the 0 dimension, each grapheme exists in its own separate one-dimensional plane. But this is also the first dimension that you theoretically could construct a writing system in. This real-life example is written Morse code, although of course this is a 2D representation of Morse code so we can physically see the glyphs. Each letter in Morse code is constructed from the 2 graphemes available, a point and a line. These glyphs represent the English letters C and Q, respectively. 2-dimensional writing is pretty simple. This is the alphabet in 2 dimensions. Yeah, we can move on. As I alluded to earlier, we have to be gracious with our definition of writing in the 3rd dimension and going forward. For the purposes of this video, I would say these 3-dimensional letter blocks are writing. Now, of course, you're seeing a 2D representation of them, but you can take any 3D glyphs you have lying around your house and confirm that they are in the 3rd dimension. Since our brains perceive reality in the 3rd dimension, this is the most you can physically see without chiral reflections in a mirror. A chiral reflection shows the rotation through the 4th dimension to give an orientation of a 3D object that is impossible to achieve by turning it in 3D space. Anyways, this is the alphabet in the 3rd dimension. Now, since our reality is based in the 3rd dimension, you could make a writing system that factors in glyph depth. If the writing medium of a writing script involves carving, graphemes could theoretically be distinguished by the depth of the carve. Now obviously that is a quite inefficient system, which is why, to my knowledge, it's never been done, especially when you factor in the erosion of surfaces over time. Before we talk about the 4th dimension, I have to talk about the divergence between mathematical dimensions and physical dimensions going forward. Mathematics allows for a countably infinite amount of dimensions, since the definition of dimension is how many coordinates are needed to specify a point in space. I should note here that I'm not a mathematician or physicist, and if you guys have corrections to this, I will post them in the description. As far as I'm aware though, mathematical dimensions are usually operating in Euclidean geometry, and physical dimensions are usually operating in non-Euclidean space. Since the 4th dimension is arguably the most useful, and I don't want to say real, but directly observable higher dimension, there's a lot of overlap between the spatial mathematical 4th dimension and the mechanical physics-based 4th dimension. I mean, look at this tesseract. We observe the 4th dimension as time with our 3D spatial brains. This gives the perception of this rotating tesseract moving through itself. However, after the 4th dimension, the mathematical and physics-based dimensions are notably different, and as such, this video going forward is split into 2 parts after I talk about the history of the 4th dimension. Euclidean space with more than 3 dimensions was developed as a concept by mathematician Ludwig Schläfli by 1853, after August Möbius, the man responsible for the Möbius strip, had already shown that rotating an object through a 4th spatial dimension yields the mirror image of a 3D object, which is similar to the chiral reflections through mirrors I was talking about earlier. Schläfli was the first to discover the regular polytopes and analogues of Platonic solids in the 4th dimension. Prior to Schläfli's work, though, physicist and mathematician, it's French, Joseph-Louis Lagrange, he published more French, Mécanique Analytique, Mechanica Analytica in 1788, which shows that mechanics operates in a 4D space with time as the 4th dimension. Hermann Minkowski was the first to treat space and time equally and use matrix notation for space and time variables together. He then developed Minkowski space, which is a mathematical representation of spacetime with the important absence of general relativity, and it's quasi-Euclidean since it treats time as a vector in a coordinate system that responds to an inertial frame within a non-imaginary vector space. If you take special relativity, which is Einstein's theory of spacetime, you can keep adding mechanical dimensions and eventually get to different parallel timelines, and ultimately, every single possible version of this universe is treated as a single point in the 10th dimension. Modern string theory states that the universe is founded on strings vibrating in the 10th dimension, which caps out our physics-based dimensional writing system at 10 dimensions. Let's get back to the spatial math-based dimensions. If we build glyphs in the 3rd dimension from 3D objects, we can do the same with 4D shapes. We could even take existing Latin alphabet glyphs and make 4D variants of them. Let's say we want to use tesseracts as pixels for this example. We can stack these in all 4 spatial dimensions, such that a glyph may only differ by 1 tesseract block's placement. We don't even necessarily need these to be closed, and can write lines that exist within 4 spatial dimensions. But building math and spatial-based glyphs in higher dimensions is tricky because without using time as a variable, we can't really perceive them well with our monkey brains. If we were to use 4D blocks, we would interpret the 4th dimension as scale. A 4D object passing through a 3D space would appear to form from nothing, expand to its maximum 3D size, and then shrink back down into nothing. But honestly, this feels like cheating to me. Similarly, if we were to use lines, then the strokes of our glyph would appear to rotate and shrink and grow as we attempt to perceive the 4th dimension. And since this is math, we can keep going with infinite dimensions. However, with each added dimension, the 2D or 3D representation becomes more disgusting to the eyes. There's one more issue with using extra spatial dimensions for our writing. Let's take a hypersphere, which is a generalization of a one-dimensional circle or two-dimensional sphere in any dimension n. The circle and the sphere are considered to be in the 1st and 2nd dimensions respectively, since that is the dimension of their surface. As you increase n, the number of dimensions, the volume of the hypersphere increases for a while, but it peaks at the 5th dimension and drops rapidly after that. The same thing happens with the surface area, although that peaks in the 7th dimension. What this means is that if we were to be writing in 20 spatial dimensions, or 40, or 537, our glyphs would end up being so small that it would be difficult to see and use as a functional writing system. As cool as hyperglyph sounds, I think physics is the way going forward to write in higher dimensions. But first, I want to give a thank you to my supporters on Patreon. They help keep this channel running, so if you'd like to support the channel, consider supporting me on Patreon. Thank you to Agma Schwa, Real American Patriot, Albert Jones, Ayu, Babalingua, Andrew, Acorn, Alexis, Teletech, Addie, Cactus Creek, To Gamer Potato, Eden, Elijah, Fetafioka, John Costello, Obfuscable, Pirate, Stein G, The Wub, and Alan. Let's make a mechanic space hyper-W. We can only perceive 3D cross-sections of the 4th dimensional hyper-W, so for our hypothetical writing system, you would not only need to get the 3 spatial dimensions spot on, but also the time in the existence of the hyper-W correct for the glyph to be a grapheme. Let's assume for this example that we can manipulate time when writing, and so different graphemes can appear in the same text at different 4D points relative to each other. This hyper-W with the 4D point of 2.5 and this one with the 4D point of 3.6 could be separate graphemes in such a writing script, and maybe the hyper-W at 4D point 1.92 is completely illegible. As we go through these dimensions, we can always imagine the current dimension as a line that is being twisted and looped through the dimension above. For humans, the 5th dimension would be all the possible paths of our lives that could be available in our version of time. A 5th dimensional grapheme would require the scribe to nail the spatial dimensions, the time in the hypergrapheme's existence, and the correct path of that hypergrapheme. Writing in the 6th dimension allows us to choose alternate paths not available in our version of time. If I wanted to travel to a version of me that was a history major instead of linguistics, that would be in the 5th dimension since that choice of major was directly controllable by me. If I wanted to travel to a version of me that was the King of England, I would have to go into the 6th dimension since no amount of chance, choice, or others' actions in this current Connor would allow me to be the King of England. The same would be of a 6th-dimensional grapheme. You would have to get the correct spatial dimensions, time, path, and reality of the glyph's existence. The 7th dimension can be viewed as a point consisting of every possible timeline from the start of the universe. A line in the 7th dimension would connect universes formed with different initial conditions. So for a grapheme to be legible in the 7th dimension, 8th, or 9th dimensions, you would need to write legibly with regards to the spatial dimensions, time, path, reality, universe, and paths between universes. We reach a limit here. The 10th dimension is functionally every single conceivable or unconceivable universe and timeline path. It is functionally infinite. Modern string theory holds that particles are made up of one-dimensional strings that vibrate in the 10th dimension, which gives us our reality and existence. Writing in the 10th dimension would require you to nail the vibrations of the strings within the glyphs so that the grapheme is spatially correct, in addition to being at the right time, in the correct path, in the correct reality, in the correct universe that can all be summed up by an infinite point. This 10th dimensional text may look completely distinct to a 10th dimensional being from this other 10th dimensional text, where the only difference is that you ate cereal for breakfast instead of eggs in a universe where frogs don't have feet due to a minor difference in the chemical composition of DNA. But if the 10th dimension is just a point, can't we just make another 10D point and draw a line between the two, and then another 10D line that crosses through that original one to make an 11th dimensional grid where we can write glyphs in the 11th dimension? I'm not sure of the theory behind this, given that 10th dimensional points are quite literally by definition everything, but I don't see why not. And I mean, think about it. If strings are vibrating in the 10th dimension, and you and I exist in a very specific point in space-time and a specific reality and universe, isn't our own writing 11th dimensional? Sure, it's imperceptible to our 3D brains, but just some food for thought. Every single thing ever led to me writing and you and I being able to read, "I love you" on this whiteboard. So this is it for writing in higher dimensions. A grapheme that requires you to nail every single string vibrating in the 10th dimension correctly and link multiple points that are fundamentally distinct universes through lines in the 11th dimension. But remember earlier in this video where I stated that Minkowski space ignores general relativity? Can't we assume that these glyphs are influenced by gravity? Enter M-theory, a theory that links all superstring theories and adds in this 11th dimensional supergravity. I have tried understanding how this stuff works, but I'm already in way over my head, so let's just assume now that we can take our 11th dimensional glyphs, add M-theory's supergravity, and pop those glyphs into what is technically the 12th dimension of our writing script. Remember earlier when I talked about chirality? What if we put these 12th dimensional glyphs next to a mirror and get a chiral reflection? We'd be moving these glyphs through the 13th dimension. So we'd have a glyph that is distinguishable from other glyphs by requiring strings vibrating in the 10th dimension with the line connecting them through the 11th dimension across different distinct universes, under the influence of supergravity in the 12th dimension, and finally by having the glyph be the mirror image of what we have written. This may not be my magnum opus, but it is great.
You have gone too far.
God?
You have gone too far.
God?
Your death would be too easy. There is a worse punishment for you. You shall become French.
No.
No, even worse. You shall become Quebecois.
No!